How do you go about breaking down technical jargon to explain and influence some of the less technical stakeholders?
I'm just thinking.
That's fine.
I've never had to break down. I've never actually had to do this per se. The closest thing I've had to do is talk about the testing approach into some detail. And then I tend to use examples from the project or the app that we're working on. But I'm sorry, I'm struggling a bit to answer this question.
So let's see if I can think of an example.
Yeah.
Have you ever had to explain? You mentioned automation at the start. Have you ever had to explain, like to someone who doesn't care that you're automating it, but for some reason you have to explain it to them? Have you ever had a situation like that?
No,
Maybe
because they don't. Because the not the less technical stakeholders. For the ones I know have never cared about the technical parts.
Interesting.
And that's why I'm struggling, because I just I prefer to speak, or I prefer to answer questions based on experience. So the closest I could think of is, wouldn't be less technical stakeholders, but just say less technical testers. And I've always just relied on examples. Like when I learned the more technical side of testing, nothing made sense or clicked until I could connect it to websites I use, applications I use. And then it's like click, 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 click. So my working assumption is that that's how other people would be helped.
That's a great answer, because also, personally, I'm a big fan of the visualizations. But again, if someone's just explaining things in theory, the thing I've always found is everyone who's in that room, the model in their head at that time is completely different. Like, as you're just explaining word after word after word. But as soon as you say it, you show it in action, or you draw a model, or you do something along those lines, you're now all talking about the same thing. And I find that becomes a lot easier. But if I'm going to reframe the question a little bit, it's why do you think you've not come across, or why is it that in your contexts, that's a weird word, right? In your experiences, how have you avoided these stakeholders? Because I've run into
loads of them. Honestly, I don't know if my experience is common. Because all the stakeholders I meet, when they first talk, they like testing or automation or quality, but really they care about their focus. Like, say the product manager cares about their roadmap, they care about the customers. So so testing is like a byproduct of that, or it's a path to that, but it's actually not their end goal. So so their focus for the less technical ones often have just been like, how will you make sure it works? Or how we don't want any bugs in production. That's a very common request. And then, so it's never been like, oh, we read about this technical thing. Oh, maybe actually there have been ones where they come across some sort of testing thing they read, like that one of their colleagues or someone that they overheard, and they'll ask, oh, should we be using this tool? And then I would say, do you have one of these problems? Or like, why are you asking me this question? Not in a nice way, of course. And yeah, but I'm not really answering the question about breaking down technical jargon. It's just, I realize I'm rambling.
No, you've actually gone in an interesting way. And I think my hunch here is that you probably avoided this conversation by being probably very good early on about finding the expectations of that stakeholder. So you probably I'm guessing you've got to the point sometimes where conversations have been guided away from going down a technical route, because you know that that's not what they're interested in. So in a way, do you ever find yourself protecting these stakeholders from being involved in technical questions?
No, because I believe in transparency. If they care, I'm actually fine with that. It's just more of generally they present their problems to me, and then I help them figure out ways to solve it. And honestly, I just don't know if this is if it's so weird that I've never had to have these conversations. So I'm sorry, Deborah. But
It's all right. Deborah, I'll chip in for me there. I agree with what Nicola said at the very start. Showing examples, showing working software or working examples, and get models in front of people. And I usually find that is a better direction of being able to get people on board. And obviously, sometimes coming up with similar narratives of, instead of explaining the complexities of Kubernetes or whatever, right? Describe it and make a terrible example now, but use a common thing like the way a car part works or the way you make a cup of tea. Find something that's common that can be shaped to give them enough of a technical know-how without actually having to break down the whole of Kubernetes.